The rain came down in sheets, turning the streets of downtown into rivers of reflected neon. Madeline Sinclair stood beneath the flickering awning of Rosie's diner, exhaustion weighing on her like a physical thing. Her phone had died hours ago, somewhere between the dinner rush and the late-night stragglers who'd nursed coffee until closing. The last bus had left 20 minutes earlier. She stared at the storm, calculating. 45 minutes on foot, maybe longer in this weather. Her grandmother's medication sat unpaid at the pharmacy, the bill a constant pressure behind her eyes. Tomorrow's double shift felt impossibly far away. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Headlights cut through the rain. A modest sedan, something practical and forgettable, pulled up to the curb. The window lowered, revealing a man whose face seemed sculpted from shadows and streetlight. Dark hair, strong jawline, eyes that held unexpected warmth. "You look like you could use a ride," he said, his voice carrying easily over the storm. Madeline hesitated. Rosie's warnings echoed in her mind. Never trust strangers, especially the ones with kind smiles. But her feet ached, and the rain showed no signs of stopping. "I don't usually accept rides from people I don't know," she said carefully. "Smart policy." He smiled, and something about it felt genuine. "I'm Alex. I just finished consulting work downtown. Where are you headed?" She studied him for another moment, then made her decision. "Madeline, I'm going to Riverside Apartments." The interior of the car was clean but worn, the kind of vehicle someone drives when they care more about function than appearance. As they pulled into traffic, Alex asked about her evening. She found herself talking easily, admitting she was a waitress with dreams that felt impossibly distant. "What kind of dreams?" he asked, and he actually seemed to listen. "Opening a community kitchen," she said softly. "Somewhere people can eat without worrying about the cost. My grandmother used to do something similar before." She trailed off, and he didn't push. Instead, he shared pieces of his own story, a consulting job that kept him working odd hours, a complicated relationship with his father, a mother he'd lost too young. The words flowed between them like they'd known each other longer than 20 minutes. When he pulled up to her apartment building, something unspoken passed between them. "Thank you," she said, meaning more than just the ride. "Maybe I'll see you around," he replied. Madeline disappeared into her building, never seeing Alex remove his worn jacket to reveal the Patek Philippe watch beneath, or the way his expression shifted from warm to contemplative as he drove away into the rain-soaked night. Alex appeared at Rosie's diner 2 nights later, sliding into a booth in Madeline's section like it was the most natural thing in the world. He wore the same unremarkable clothes, jeans that had seen better days, a jacket that could have belonged to anyone. When she approached with her order pad, surprise flickered across her face. "Small world," he said with that same disarming smile. Over the following weeks, he became a fixture during her late shifts. Always the same booth, always ordering coffee and whatever the special happened to be. Their conversations deepened with each visit. Madeline found herself sharing things she rarely told anyone. Her parents' accident when she was 12, how her grandmother had stepped in without hesitation, the single semester of culinary school before Louise's Alzheimer's diagnosis changed everything. "She used to feed half the neighborhood," Madeline said one night, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup during her break. "Didn't matter if they could pay. She said hungry people need food, not lectures." Alex listened with an intensity that made her feel seen. He shared his own losses, his mother's battle with cancer, the way his father had retreated into work afterward, becoming a stranger who wore his father's face. He talked about loneliness, about building walls to keep people at a distance. He never mentioned the empire he'd built, or the penthouse overlooking Central Park, or the fact that his consulting work involved running a tech company worth billions. From behind the counter, Rosie Martinez watched with narrowed eyes. She'd been running this diner for 30 years, had survived an abusive marriage, and built something good from the ashes. She knew how to read people, and something about this Alex didn't add up. His hands were too smooth, his posture too confident. The way he moved spoke of someone accustomed to command, not the odd-hours consultant he claimed to be. "Be careful with that one," Rosie told Madeline during a lull between customers. "He's just a friend," Madeline protested, but her cheeks colored. "Honey, men don't show up at 2 in the morning 3 times a week for friendship." Tommy Richardson, the other night shift waiter, shared Rosie's skepticism. He watched from across the diner as Madeline laughed at something Alex said, her whole face lighting up in a way Tommy had never managed to inspire. He'd harbored feelings for Madeline since his first week at Rosie's, drawn to her kindness and the way she treated the diner's regulars like family. But she'd never looked at him the way she looked at Alex. That guy tips like he's trying to hide something, Tommy muttered, noting how Alex would leave generous amounts then seem to catch himself, adjusting downward. What none of them knew was that Alex had started recording voice memos on his phone. They began as clinical observations. Subject shows genuine altruism, refuses compliments, demonstrates consistent values, but gradually transformed into something more vulnerable. I find myself wanting to tell her the truth, he admitted to his phone one night. Not because the experiment demands it, but because she deserves better than my deception. But if I tell her now, I lose her. And I'm not ready for that. The breaking point came on a Thursday night when Madeline's composure finally cracked. She'd been moving mechanically through her shift, but Alex saw the tremor in her hands as she poured his coffee, the redness around her eyes that suggested recent tears. "What's wrong?" he asked quietly. The concern in his voice undid her. The words spilled out. Another hospital bill for Louise. Medications the insurance wouldn't cover. The crushing weight of choosing between her grandmother's care and keeping the lights on. When she finished, she looked away, embarrassed by her own vulnerability. "Let me help," Alex said immediately. "I have some savings." "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "I appreciate it, really, but I don't accept charity." The refusal hit Alex like a physical blow. It was exactly what he'd hoped to find. Someone whose integrity couldn't be bought, but knowing he'd orchestrated this moment made him feel sick. He saw the pride in her eyes warring with exhaustion, and he hated himself for testing her. "Then let me take you somewhere that doesn't involve this diner," he said. "As friends. No obligations." They met on Saturday at a free community art exhibit, walking through galleries filled with work from local artists. Madeline studied each piece with genuine interest, seeing beauty where others saw amateur efforts. They ended up at a late-night food cart, where she insisted on buying them both coffee with her tips. "You don't have to," Alex started. "I want to," she said firmly. "You've been kind to me. Let me be kind back." As they walked through the quiet streets, their hands brushed. Alex caught her fingers, and she didn't pull away. They stopped beneath a streetlight, the city humming around them, and he leaned closer. Her breath caught. His lips were inches from hers when her phone shattered the moment. "It's the hospital," she said, her voice breaking. Alex drove her there, his sedan cutting through traffic with barely legal speed. In the waiting room, surrounded by antiseptic smells and fluorescent lighting, Madeline finally broke. He held her as she sobbed into his shoulder, and when she whispered, "I'm falling for you," he felt his carefully constructed world begin to collapse. He couldn't say it back. The words stuck in his throat, tangled up with guilt and genuine emotion, and the terrible knowledge that every moment between them was built on deception. Instead, he held her tighter, feeling like the coward he was. Later that night, he met David Park at an empty parking garage. David had been his friend since college, the only person who knew about the test. They'd built Rothwell Technologies together, weathered every storm as a team. But tonight, David's expression held something Alex had never seen before: disappointment. "You're in too deep," David said flatly. "Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. "I know." Alex ran his hands through his hair. "David, she's everything. She's real and good and completely herself. And I'm lying to her face every single day." "Then stop lying." "If I tell her now, you'll lose her," David finished. "But you're going to lose her anyway, Alex. The only question is whether you lose her as a liar or as someone who had the courage to be honest." Alex had no answer for that. The cracks in Alex's carefully maintained double life began to show in unexpected places. He'd grown careless, letting his guard slip during visits to Madeline's modest apartment. Louise, despite the fog of Alzheimer's, had moments of startling clarity, and during one such moment, her eyes fixed on his wrist. "That's an expensive watch for a consultant," she said quietly, her Taiwanese accent more pronounced than usual. Alex froze, realizing he'd forgotten to remove the Patek Philippe. He started to stammer an explanation, but Louise raised a hand to stop him. The truth always finds its way out, young man, she said, her gaze piercing through his defenses. The question is whether you'll be brave enough to speak it first, or whether you'll let it tear apart something beautiful. Her words haunted him for days. He'd been tested by an elderly woman with a failing memory, and he'd been found wanting. Meanwhile, at Rothwell Technologies' Glass and Steel headquarters, another problem was materializing. Victoria Sterling had returned, her presence announced by his secretary's panicked call. She swept into his corner office like she owned it, designer heels clicking against imported marble. "Hello, Alex," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk with practiced ease. "Miss me? What do you want, Victoria?" "The same thing I've always wanted. What's mine?" She crossed her legs, examining her perfect manicure. "I have some very interesting information about your recent activities. A little bird told me you've been playing dress-up, pretending to be one of the common folk. Dating a waitress, how quaint." Alex's blood turned to ice. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" She pulled out her phone, showing him photos, him entering Rosie's diner, sitting in Madeline's section, the two of them walking through the city. "I wonder what the tech blogs would pay for this story. Billionaire conducts social experiment on unsuspecting woman. It has a certain tabloid appeal, don't you think?" "What do you want?" he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "A meeting. You, me, and a conversation about how we both move forward. Otherwise, I start making calls." After she left, David found Alex staring out at the city skyline. "Let me guess," David said. "Victoria. She knows about Madeline. She's threatening to leak it. Then you need to tell Madeline first. Control the narrative." "I can't," Alex said. "Not yet. I need time to transition, to make it less shocking. I'll tell her I got a promotion, start introducing the truth gradually." "Alex, listen to yourself. You're planning more lies to cover the existing lies. This isn't going to end well." But Alex was already planning, already strategizing, treating his relationship like a business problem that could be solved with the right approach. He didn't see the trap closing around him until it was too late. Victoria made her move 3 days later, feeding carefully selected information to a tech blogger known for breaking industry gossip. The post was vague but intriguing. Hints about a prominent CEO conducting social experiments and testing regular people's intentions. It included no names, but those who knew where to look could connect the dots. Tommy saw it first, scrolling through his phone during a slow afternoon shift. Something about the details, the timing, the description of late-night diner visits, made his stomach drop. He did what any good friend would do. He started investigating. That evening, when Alex arrived at the diner for what he'd planned as his confession, Madeline met him with questions in her eyes. But before he could speak, she kissed him. Their first real kiss, born from weeks of building tension and unspoken feelings. It was perfect and terrible because Alex knew he didn't deserve it. "I need to tell you something," he started, but his phone buzzed with an urgent message from his assistant. The Rothwell Technologies charity gala was the next evening, and his presence as CEO was non-negotiable. A major partnership announcement required him to be there, in person, in his real identity. The walls were closing in, and Alex could feel his time running out. Tommy cornered Madeline during her break the next day, spreading printouts across the break room table like evidence at a crime scene. Blog posts, social media screenshots, photos of a man who looked remarkably like Alex at high-profile tech events. "Tell me I'm crazy," Tommy said. "Tell me this isn't your Alex." Madeline studied the images, her heart rate accelerating. The man in the photos wore expensive suits and commanded boardrooms. But his eyes, she knew those eyes. "It's not him," she said, but doubt had planted its seed. "Alex is a consultant. He drives an old sedan. He's not some billionaire." "Madeline, I said it's not him," she snapped, gathering the papers and shoving them back at Tommy. But she couldn't unsee them. That evening, when Alex walked into the diner, she was waiting. "Tommy showed me something today," she said without preamble. "Photos of someone who looks like you. Alexander Rothwell, CEO of Rothwell Technologies. It's ridiculous, right? Case of mistaken identity." Alex's face did something complicated, a flicker of panic before settling into forced calm. This was it, the moment he should tell her everything. David's words echoed in his mind. Be honest or lose her as a liar. But fear won. "Tommy's wrong," he said, meeting her eyes and lying directly to her face. "I'm not a billionaire, Madeline. I'm just a guy who really likes spending time with you." She wanted to believe him so badly that she did, pushing aside the doubt, the inconsistencies, the way he seemed to know too much about things a simple consultant shouldn't know. Later, she would recognize this as the moment everything could have been different. But in that moment, she chose trust. Alex left the diner feeling sick with self-loathing. He'd had his chance, and he'd doubled down on the deception. The lies were compounding, each one requiring another to maintain the illusion. His phone rang as he reached his actual car, the Tesla he kept parked 3 blocks away. David's voice was tight with urgency. "The gala is mandatory. The board insisted. They're announcing the merger with Kensington AI. You have to be there as CEO." "I'll tell Madeline first," Alex said. "I'll explain everything before the gala." "You better. Because if she finds out any other way, you're done." Alex tried calling Madeline repeatedly, but she was working a double shift and couldn't answer. He left a voicemail, his voice cracking with barely controlled panic. "Madeline, I need to talk to you. Tonight, after your shift. It's important. There are things I should have told you weeks ago, and I'm sorry I waited. Please, just meet me. I'll explain everything." But fate had other plans. Rosie, noticing Madeline's distracted state, she'd mixed up 3 orders and nearly dropped a tray, sent her home early. "You're no good to anyone like this," Rosie said gently. "Go home, rest." Madeline left through the back door, missing Alex's frantic arrival by 10 minutes. Her mind churned with Tommy's accusations and Alex's denial. She made a decision, the kind that feels right in the moment but changes everything. She would find Alex, surprise him, prove to herself that Tommy was wrong. She scrolled through her phone, finding the text where Alex had once sent his address for a package delivery. Tommy, seeing her determination, helped her look up the location. "Madeline, maybe this isn't a good idea," Tommy said, worry creasing his forehead. "I need to know," she said simply. Across town, Alex stood in his penthouse, surrounded by the trappings of wealth he'd hidden from her, preparing for a mandatory gala that would expose everything. He checked his phone obsessively, waiting for Madeline's response that never came. The trap had been set, and neither of them saw it closing until it was far too late. Madeline's world fractured the moment she stepped into the penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering city, but her eyes fixated on the framed magazine covers. Alexander Rothwell, Tech's youngest billionaire. Her hands trembled as she picked up one featuring his face. Older, polished, utterly unfamiliar. The apartment screamed wealth. Abstract art on marble walls. Furnishings that cost more than her grandmother's lifetime earnings. She sank onto a designer couch, feeling the weight of every lie settle into her bones. Meanwhile, Alex existed in a different universe entirely. The Rothwell Technologies gala sparkled with crystal chandeliers and champagne towers. He moved through crowds in his custom tuxedo, playing the role he'd perfected, billionaire CEO. But everything changed when Victoria Sterling arrived, her laugh cutting through the chatter like a knife. She touched his arm possessively, speaking loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Playing charity today, are we, Alex? Finding love among the common folk." Her voice dripped with mockery. "What's her name this time?" "Let me guess. She's genuine, hardworking, completely unaware you're conducting one of your experiments." David tried to intervene, but security alerts buzzed on Alex's phone. Someone had entered his penthouse. His blood ran cold. He pushed through the crowd toward the exit, his practiced composure cracking. As he reached the ballroom entrance, she materialized like a ghost in his designer dream. Madeline stood drenched in rain, still wearing her diner uniform, holding one of the magazine covers. The room fell silent. Their eyes met across the expanse of wealth and light, and Alex saw it all at once. The destruction of everything, reflected in her devastated expression. "Who are you?" Her voice broke across the silence, small and shattered. Victoria's laughter echoed through the ballroom. "Oh, this is priceless. Another naive girl? Alex, you really do have a type." Cameras flashed. Photographers sensed blood in the water. The private betrayal became public spectacle in seconds, and there was no taking it back. Madeline ran. Through rain-soaked streets, past indifferent crowds, until her legs gave out on a park bench. Tommy found her there, soaked and trembling, and carried her back to Rosie's diner, the only sanctuary left in a world that suddenly felt hostile. The story exploded across social media before midnight. Billionaire caught playing poor to test Waitress. Her face plastered tabloid websites and viral TikTok compilations. Within hours, she'd transformed from anonymous waitress to unwilling celebrity, her heartbreak dissected by thousands of strangers. The humiliation was complete. Alex tried everything. Flowers arrived daily at the diner. Roses so expensive they seemed obscene. Letters begged for 5 minutes to explain. He stood outside for hours, hoping she'd emerge. She never did. Rosie turned him away at the door with a withering look that said everything about his moral failure. Then James Rothwell appeared, his tailored suit somehow threatening in the modest diner. He produced a check for $500,000 like a weapon. Signed an NDA. "Disappear," he said coldly. "You'll never have to work again." Madeline stared at the check, then at this man who'd raised a son incapable of trust. Something inside her broke open, not from sadness, but rage. She tore the check into pieces, her voice steady and lethal. "You raised a son who thinks people are experiments, who has billions but can't afford vulnerability, who would rather test someone's heart than risk his own. You failed him, and he failed me, but money won't fix either of us." She stepped closer. "The woman who loved him didn't want your money. She wanted honesty, and you couldn't even teach him that." James's face went pale. He saw his late wife in her fury, that same fire that couldn't be bought. He left without another word. Meanwhile, Alex spiraled in his penthouse, listening to voice memos he'd recorded, his own voice documenting the journey from scientist studying a specimen to man completely undone by love. David arrived and dragged him from the darkness. "Stop wallowing," David commanded. "If you actually love her, you'll fight. But not with flowers. Not with grand gestures. With truth and action. Finally, after all this, truth." Grandmother Louise requested a meeting. Alex arrived at the modest apartment with the dread of a man approaching judgment, but found something different, understanding born from lived pain. Louise's moment of clarity was a gift, rare and precious. She sat with Alex and shared a story he'd never heard. Decades ago, she fell in love with a wealthy man in Taiwan who hid his identity to test if she loved him for himself. When the truth emerged, she left him in fury. But the years that followed were haunted by regret. She wondered endlessly about the what-ifs, about the genuine fear that had motivated his deception. "Your test was wrong," Louise said, her aged eyes penetrating. "Your deception was cruel. But I understand fear. I was too proud to forgive it." She reached for his hand. "If you truly love my granddaughter, you must prove it not through words or grand gestures, but through action. Help her dream. Anonymously. Expect nothing in return. That is how you show love when you've shattered trust." Louise's wisdom planted seeds of redemption. Alex listened, and for the first time, understood. David brought Madeline the voice memos, laying them on the counter at Rosie's without explanation. She resisted at first, but Tommy encouraged her to listen. His own history with abandoned trust made him surprisingly compassionate. The recordings broke her heart anew and healed it simultaneously. She heard Alex's clinical detachment dissolve into genuine wonder. She heard him fall in love with her through his own voice. And in the final memo, recorded just before the gala, his vulnerability was raw. "I'm going to tell her everything tonight. I'm terrified, but David's right. She deserves the truth. I just hope she can forgive me. I love her. God, I actually love her." That night, Madeline visited her parents' graves and sat between their headstones, processing everything. She'd built a life on independence after losing them. The thought of trusting someone again, of risking that vulnerability, felt like betraying the armor she'd constructed. But somewhere in the darkness, she began to understand that fear and love aren't opposites. They're partners in the same dance. A week later, an anonymous donation arrived, enough to secure a space for Madeline's community kitchen dream. Louise's kitchen would be named for the woman who taught her both the cost of pride and the value of service. 3 months transformed everything. Louise's kitchen opened on a Saturday morning, and the neighborhood gathered like it was their own wedding. Rosie brought food. Tommy coordinated volunteers. The local community center buzzed with life. Free meals for anyone who needed them. Cooking classes, a space where hunger and loneliness were both addressed. Alex watched from across the street, maintaining his distance as Louise had advised. David had quietly helped with permits and logistics. and the anonymous donation had proven itself genuine. No strings, no publicity, no expectation. Victoria crashed the opening like a wasp in a garden, her designer heels clicking aggressively across the kitchen floor. She found Madeline serving soup to an elderly man and smiled viciously. "The Billionaire's charity case," she announced loudly, ensuring everyone heard. "Didn't realize your little dream was bought with Rothwell money. Cute story, but everything about you is his purchase." Madeline set down her ladle and turned to face Victoria with a clarity that came from 3 months of healing. "The money came anonymously," she said simply. "I don't know who gave it, and neither do you. But whoever did understood something you clearly don't. That feeding people matters more than taking credit for it. That service is its own reward. Maybe you should learn that before your next con." The crowd that surrounded Madeline wasn't there for Alex's money. It was there for her character. The community rallied around her, and Victoria left humiliated, her cruelty exposed as the petty thing it was. Then James Rothwell appeared, unexpected and transformed by 3 months of reckoning with his own failures. He approached Madeline privately, his expensive suit somehow diminished by genuine humility. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "You reminded me of my wife, someone who couldn't be bought, who spoke hard truths. I failed my son emotionally, tried to compensate with money. He's been miserable, mechanical. The light went out of him when you did." James met her eyes. "I'm not asking for forgiveness for myself. But maybe, consider giving him closure. You both deserve that." Grandmother Louise, standing nearby with her own light still burning, caught Madeline's eye and gave her a knowing nod. The elder understood what the younger was learning, that forgiveness was a gift given to yourself as much as another. The park bench where Tommy found her 3 months ago had become a sacred place, a meeting point between 2 worlds that had collided so catastrophically they'd nearly destroyed each other. The same park, the same bench, but the context transformed everything. Rain fell again, not as the beginning of an accidental meeting, but as witness to a deliberately chosen one. The storm was less violent than that first night, steadier, as if the universe itself had learned patience. Madeline arrived 15 minutes early, her heart a timpani in her chest. She almost didn't come. 3 times she'd called Tommy and asked him to cancel. 3 times he'd refused, his voice carrying the certainty of someone who'd learned the difference between protection and imprisonment. "You need to do this for you," he'd said. Not for him, not for closure, for yourself. She saw Alex before he saw her. He was already there, sitting on the bench with his hands clasped between his knees, looking smaller somehow than she remembered. He wore simple jeans and a worn jacket, the same uniform he'd worn when he was supposed to be a consultant, but now it felt different. Now it felt like choice rather than deception. No expensive watch, no designer anything. Just a man, thoroughly human, terrifyingly vulnerable in his ordinariness. When he noticed her, he stood, but didn't move closer. They stood separated by 8 feet and 3 months of devastation, by viral headlines and public humiliation, by shattered trust and the slow, careful work of personal reckoning. "You came," Alex said quietly. "I almost didn't," Madeline replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I've rehearsed this conversation 100 times. What I'd say, what I wouldn't, what I'd let you explain, and what I wouldn't listen to." Alex nodded, accepting this. He gestured to the bench. "Can we sit?" They sat with careful distance between them, not touching, the rain beginning to dampen their clothes. For a long moment, neither spoke. The sound of rainfall on leaves filled the silence, a natural thing, a peaceful thing, which felt almost wrong given the weight of what needed to be said. "I'm not going to make excuses," Alex began, and something in his voice told Madeline he meant it. His tone lacked the polish she remembered from the gala, the smooth confidence of someone accustomed to controlling rooms. This was different. This was a man who'd spent 3 months being wrong, and had finally stopped trying to prove otherwise. "I'm not going to tell you that Victoria's betrayal was an excuse, or that my mother's death explains why I tested you, or that my father's emotional absence justifies what I did. Those are facts about my life, not justifications for my choices. I need you to understand the difference." Madeline listened, unspeaking, watching the rain collect in his dark hair. "What I did was cruel," Alex continued, each word seeming to cost him something. "I convinced myself I was being smart, protective, scientific even. as if emotions could be studied like data, as if trust could be measured and qualified. I told myself I was protecting us both, but really I was just afraid. I was terrified of vulnerability, so I created a situation where I could control the variables, where you couldn't hurt me because you were never seeing the real me. Except the real me fell in love with you despite all my careful safeguards. And when that happened, I had a choice. He paused, and Madeline could see his jaw tightening. I had a choice, he repeated quietly, to tell you the truth, or to continue the lie and hope it would all somehow resolve itself. I chose the cowardly option. I made plans to gradually introduce changes, the fake promotion, the explanations about why my life was shifting. I thought if I did it slowly, carefully, it wouldn't be as much of a betrayal. But that was still a lie, still a deception. And it was Victoria who forced the timeline, forced the public exposure, because I didn't have the courage to do it myself. Madeline felt tears mixing with the rain on her face. She wasn't crying from sadness exactly, but from the complex alchemy of grief and understanding and the pain of watching someone you cared about finally understand what they'd done. I've been in therapy, Alex said, twice a week for the last 3 months. I'm working through why I thought I could engineer trust, why vulnerability felt like weakness, why I needed to test rather than risk. My therapist says, he stopped himself, giving a small, bitter laugh. Actually, my therapist says I'm very good at intellectualizing my emotions as a defense mechanism, that I'm probably doing it right now. Despite everything, Madeline almost smiled. The voice memos David gave you, Alex continued. Those are real. Every moment of them. My evolution from clinical observation to genuine love. That happened exactly as you heard it. I wasn't performing for an audience. I wasn't recording some elaborate backup plan. I was documenting my own dissolution, my own transformation from someone who believed people were inherently selfish to someone who believed you were inherently good. That transformation was terrifying and beautiful and completely real. He pulled out his phone and opened the voice memo app. There's one you didn't hear, he said. David didn't share this one. I recorded it last night. I want you to hear it, but I need you to understand something first. I'm not sharing this to convince you of anything, not to win you back or to prove I love you. I'm sharing it because you deserve to hear what I'm about to say directly from me, not filtered through my fear or my need to control the narrative. He pressed play. Alex's voice came through the phone speaker, raw and uncertain. It's 11:47 p.m., and I'm probably not going to sleep tonight. I've been thinking about what David said, about how this is Madeline's last chance to walk away with her dignity intact. I've been thinking about James, about how he tried to buy her off, and she tore up his check. She's stronger than I am, stronger than everyone in my life. I've spent 3 months working on myself, going to therapy, understanding why I'm broken in the ways I'm broken. And maybe I've gotten better. Maybe I'm actually capable of honesty now. But the truth is, I don't deserve another chance with her. I destroyed something precious, and no amount of therapy or self-improvement changes that fundamental fact. The recorded Alex paused, and they could hear rain in the background. But I'm going to ask her anyway. The voice continued, and now there was something raw and honest in it that made Madeline's breath catch. Not because I'm hopeful or because I think it'll work, but because she deserves to know that her experience of me wasn't false, even if the context was. She deserves to know that the man she fell in love with, the one who listened to her dreams, who sat with her when her grandmother had her episode, who saw her and genuinely saw her, that man was real. The deception was real, but the man beneath the deception was real too. If there's any chance, even a small one, that she can understand the difference between those things, between the wrong I did and the real connection we had, then I owe it to her to try, to ask, to put myself out there knowing she'll probably say no. Because she deserves that choice, and I deserve to live with the consequences of my actions. He stopped the recording. The rain fell harder now, and neither of them moved to seek shelter. I have no expectations, Alex said quietly. I mean that completely. Louise told me to help your dream anonymously because that's what love looks like when you've destroyed trust. Service without expectation. She was wise beyond measure. I've learned more from your grandmother in one conversation than I learned from my father in 34 years. That matters to me. She matters to me. Madeline's voice, when she finally spoke, was fractured but clear. I listened to the memos. All of them. I listened to you fall in love with me. I listened to you struggle with the deception. I listened to your guilt and your confusion and your terror of losing me. She wiped rain from her face. And I hated hearing it because it made you real in a way that was harder to hate. She turned to face him fully. Grandma Louise told me something you probably don't know. She asked me what I was most afraid of, losing you, or losing the possibility of finding happiness with someone because I let fear make my decisions. She told me about a man in Taiwan, about how pride and fear cost her decades of wondering. She said that your test was wrong and your deception was cruel, but that she understood fear, that she'd lived with that understanding for a very long time. Alex watched her, barely breathing. I don't trust you, Madeline said, and the words landed like necessary gravity. I want to be very clear about that. Trust doesn't heal just because someone's sorry. Trust doesn't reboot like a broken computer. It's slower than that, harder than that, more uncertain than that. She paused, gathering courage. But I also know that I'm terrified of trusting again, of being hurt again, of letting someone into my carefully constructed world only to have them dismantle it. And I realized something in the last 3 months. My fear and my hurt have been protecting me, but they've also been imprisoning me. And I don't want to live in a prison, even if it's one I built myself. Alex started to speak, but Madeline held up a hand. I'm not saying I forgive you, she said. I'm not saying we're magically fixed, but I'm saying I'm willing to try something. I'm proposing something radical, actually. She took a breath. What if we started over? Not pretend the betrayal didn't happen. I'll never forget it, and I don't think I should. But what if we started over with the knowledge we have now? 2 people getting to know each other honestly, without tests or disguises or games. Slowly, building something real from the wreckage, not ignoring the wreckage. Alex closed his eyes, rain streaming down his face. Are you saying yes? I'm saying I'm willing to try, Madeline corrected gently. That's not the same as yes. Yes is easier. Yes is what fairy tales are made of. What I'm offering is harder. It's choosing to trust again when trust has been broken. It's waking up every day and deciding to show up honestly. It's believing that maybe, eventually, something real can be built on this foundation of broken things. I'll take it, Alex said immediately. I'll take whatever you're willing to give. Then we start from here, Madeline said. She stood and extended her hand. No grand gestures. No expensive gifts. Just honest conversation. He took her hand, and for the first time in 3 months, they touched. It felt tentative and new and necessary. They sat on that bench for hours while the rain fell and the city moved around them. They talked about everything, his childhood, her dreams, the real reasons behind his test, the real depth of her hurt. They didn't pretend the conversation healed everything. They acknowledged the gaps, the places where trust would need to be rebuilt, the possibility that they might eventually realize they'd grown in different directions. But they also acknowledged something else, the possibility that 2 broken people could choose, every single day, to build something honest and real together. 1 year later, Louise's kitchen had become a neighborhood institution. The waiting list for cooking classes stretched around the block. Free meals served every day at lunch and dinner. The walls were decorated with photographs and artwork from the community members it served. It was chaos and joy and exactly what Madeline had always envisioned. Alex was there most Saturdays, not as benefactor, but as partner. He wore an apron that read, "I'm Louise's kitchen staff," and he never mentioned his donation or his wealth. He chopped vegetables and served food and learned to listen to stories without trying to fix everything. He'd changed in quiet ways that didn't make headlines. The way he asked before assuming, the way he sat with discomfort instead of trying to resolve it immediately, the way he loved without needing control. Grandmother Louise passed on a Tuesday morning in early autumn, peacefully. Her final words to Madeline, "I'm proud of you, granddaughter. You were braver than I was. You chose forgiveness instead of pride." At her funeral, standing beside her grave with autumn leaves falling around them, Alex slipped a simple ring onto Madeline's finger. It was modest, white gold, a small diamond, nothing that screamed expense. They'd chosen it together over coffee and conversation, and it meant something because of that. The final image existed in quiet moments. Madeline and Alex stood side by side in Louise's kitchen, serving meals to the community. Their partnership wasn't built on wealth or tests or grand romantic gestures. It was built on the hard, unglamorous work of rebuilding trust through sustained honesty, proving love through consistent action, and honoring the wisdom of those who came before them. Outside the kitchen windows, the city continued its chaos. People rushing, money changing hands, ambitions rising and falling. But inside, where strangers became family over shared meals and honest conversation, something sacred lived. The knowledge that genuine connection, earned through vulnerability and maintained through integrity, was worth more than any fortune. That real love wasn't something you tested or controlled. It was something you chose every single day with full knowledge of the cost. Up next, we have two more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.